Afternoon and welcome to the October 27th meeting of the Glendale Audit Committee. We apologize for the technical difficulties, but we're ready to get started. Roll call, please.
Committee member Michael Bain.
Present.
Ed Kashadurian is absent. Jack Mavian. Alex Parajon is absent. And Chair Zaria Mirian.
Present. Next item, please.
Item number 2, business agenda. A, report of recording secretary regarding posting of agenda. The agenda for the October 27, 2022 Audit Committee meeting was posted on October 24, 2022 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. Next item.
Item number 3, oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes. The committee may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The Audit Committee Chair may refer the matter to staff for investigation and report.
I have no cards, and do we have any phone calls?
No.
Okay, next item, please.
Item number 4, approval of minutes. Part A, minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on July 28, 2022.
Okay, well, we do have 2 new members here, so Ms. Varpetian, I'm not sure we can approve these minutes right now, considering that Mr. Mavian and Mr. Bain are at their first meeting. So I will go ahead and table this item until the next meeting. Next item, please.
Sorry, I have a quick question.
Yes,
So
Ms. Shang.
if we have another member show up, then we can do it, right?
Ms. Shang, my understanding is we would need at least 3 members who
yeah,
were
that's right.
there
That's
in
right.
order to have the
Sorry.
item.
Yeah.
Next item, please.
Item number 5, action items.
There are no items here. Next item, please.
Item number 6, reports, information. 6A, internal audit activity report as of September 30, 2022. Jesse Zhang, internal audit manager.
Ms. Zhang.
Good afternoon, Chair Miriam and Audit Committee members. Jesse Zhang, Internal Audit Manager. So this afternoon, I would like to provide you a report on the internal audit activities for the quarter ended September 30th, 2022. So as outlined in the report, at the beginning of the report, I also have that on the big screen, so we can all follow along. There are a total 7 sections within this report, and then we'll go over each one of them. So section 1 listed the projects that we have completed during this past quarter. We have prepared 2 PowerPoint presentations for you. So the first presentation is on the public records request audit. So this audit is completed by our internal auditor, Ms. Ani Antonician. She has done a comprehensive review of the city's PRR process and the tool the city uses to process the many requests received from the public. So in this presentation, Ani will go over with you what the audit reviewed or didn't review, and then the time frame covered, criteria used, and the results, etc. So from the report cover, you can see that there's no priority 1 issue, so that's a good thing. Nonetheless, Ani has identified many detailed improvement opportunities. So we're hoping this audit provides a roadmap or checklist for the city to continue to improve the PRR process and to better serve the public. Before I turn it to Ani, I would like to point out that we received a lot of support and assistance from various city departments. So including departments that had the most number of requests. They provided their feedback on using the tools and how their feedback on the overall process. And then from legal, So we seek their feedback on compliance issues. And then from IT department as well. So Ani made many recommendations related to automation. So we wanted to make sure that before we make the recommendation, we want to check they are technically feasible. And last but not least, the city clerk's office, both the former city clerk, Aram Ajimin, and then our new city clerk, Dr. Susie Abajian. So they both provided a lot of the support, and especially Dr. Abajian, when she started her new position, we were already finalizing the report. And then she, spent time, read the report, and sat down with us, review the recommendations line by line, and to make sure that we're on the same page in terms of the actions needed to implement those recommendations. So we really appreciate that. So I know Ani is very excited to present this to you. Let me bring up the PowerPoint. Get started. So let's see.
Okay. Just check that it works. Okay. Thank you, Jesse.
Ms. Antonessian?
Good afternoon, Chair Marion and committee members. My name is Ani Antonessian. I am an internal auditor in the Internal Audit Division, and I will be presenting an audit I recently performed on the public record request process at the City of Glendale. The city's compliance with PRR's public record request stems from the California Public Records Act, CPRA, that provides the public a right to access government records. It was enacted in 1968 to safeguard the accountability of government to the public, promote maximum disclosure of the conduct of governmental operations, and it acknowledges the principle that secrecy is antithetical to a democratic system of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So what is a public record? This is verbatim from the CPRA. It is defined as any writing containing information relating to the conduct of the public's business prepared, owned, used, or retained by any state or local agency, regardless of physical form or characteristics. So a little bit of an overview on the CPRA. When a PRR is received by the city, it must reasonably describe an identifiable record. It must be focused, specific, and reasonably clear so that the city can decipher what record is being sought. PRRs only apply to records existing at the time of the request, so the city is under no duty to produce a record that may be created in the future. The timing of the response, a local agency must respond promptly, but no later than 10 calendar days from the receipt of the request to notify the requester that records will be disclosed. And it is important to note that our city's response time rules are stricter than those of the CPRA because they count weekends and holidays within a 10-day span. The city may also extend a 10-day response for an additional 14 days, and the CPRA provides 4 criteria. For instance, the request is voluminous, or it requires multiple departments within the city to respond to. The city may extend the request. And now I can cover the city's PRR process. So the first step is obviously the public submits a PRR, and that can be done through various means. You can do it in person, by phone, by email, by mail, or through the online form available on the website. So once the request is received, city staff, city clerk staff enter this request into a list. It's a SharePoint list. We refer to it as the tracker, the SharePoint tracker, because it tracks the PRRs. After that's done, departments are assigned, or a department is assigned to look into the request. After this point, 4 possible scenarios can play out. A record is found and it's responded to within 10 days. Or we notify the requester that we have to extend the request by an additional 14 days. Or the record either partially or wholly cannot be disclosed, which this is very rare, but it can happen, or records are not found for this request. And all of these 4 scenarios go through a very rigorous city attorney's review, and then a response is sent to the requester. So that's the process in a nutshell. There was the tracker that I mentioned has data in it, so we wanted to just understand what is the average number of requests that we get per month, and it was about 120. This was the period that we're looking at, calendar year 2021. The departments that get the most requests during that period were CDD, that's Community Development, followed by Glendale PD, Glendale Fire, and the City Clerk's Office received the most requests. The objective of this audit was to assess the adequacy of controls over the public record request process and compliance with laws and regulations. Our scope was the records that were received in calendar year 2021, and I would like to note that the scope did not include non-disclosures and any instances of where legal judgment was exercised. The audit process included reviewing the California Public Records Act, the city clerk's office policy documents, their procedures. We also interviewed, as Jesse mentioned, city clerks, staff, city attorneys. We worked with information technology, and we also interviewed the departments that received those most PRRs in the calendar year 21. We also did detailed test work on over 1,440 public records that were received in calendar year 21 to assess the data quality, process efficiency, and adequacy of controls. And we also performed a very brief survey of other cities, just looking at their public-facing PRR components, so mainly their web pages and what was available online. In summary, we have identified 9 improvement opportunities, and they are related to 4 of these categories. We have 2 in compliance, 3 data integrity related, 2 efficiency, and 2 open data. So I'll cover the first finding for in the compliance category. According to the PRA, there is a requirement to state the name and title of the decision maker in 4 applicable scenarios. So when we are redacting records or when we need to extend the record, if there is a non-disclosure case or a record is not found, that communication must be done in a written format, which we are doing. But we found that when we're looking at the responses, the city clerk's signature was borne on the email, and we were just not sure if that necessarily is a decision maker in each of those scenarios. So our recommendation is to standardize the communication, bearing in mind this PRA requirement. We also noted that when we're responding to requesters and we're sending them redacted documents, that the email didn't necessarily state that the documents are in redacted form. The second has to do with the city policies. The city clerk's policies, like I said, has very detailed procedures and documents related to this operation. We did note very minor improvements in this area, just some inconsistencies within the policy documents. For instance, which department should be contacted when an extension is being sought. There were also a couple of instances when the practice did not follow policy, not of grand magnitude, very, very minor. For instance, attaching the original request that bears the receipt date in the tracker, so attaching those originals consistently. And when a department directly contacts the requester, the policies note that the city clerk needs to be the one that contacts. And we would also like to see policies or guides, if possible, related to how to obviously, staff redact a lot of these documents that are sent over to the public, and if possible, we would like to see a guide that shows commonly redacted information so that city staff can use. The policies also did not reference collection or record duplication fees or retention of records. So the second area of findings are related to data integrity. So when we were covering this area, and it has never really been audited before, right? The first question that comes up, at least came up to me, was, are we responding to these requests within that 10-day time frame, right? And for that, you need two pieces of information. You need the date of receipt of the request and when it was completed. And we're doing a great job on the date of receipt, but the completion date is not being consistently tracked. So we couldn't systematically provide you an answer today, but we did perform a very manual review of all of the PRRs that were received in December 2021. That was about 116 PRRs. And the good news was that the average response time was 8 days. So that's well below the 10-day period, the 10-day response time. However, to reduce any kind of time-consuming manual calculation, and if this question is of interest, this data should be collected, the completion dates consistently. And then the next area of improvements, so the tracker that I mentioned, we made a slew of other recommendations on how to improve the data quality here. So that's mainly to ensure data consistency and completeness. So for instance, if you may have a question as to what are the most commonly requested documents, right? We're not necessarily tracking that. So that's the recommendation, is to classify these systematically by request type so we can analyze that. So we get a better idea of the patterns within this data set. The last finding related to data integrity, which is part of our audits, is any system we look into, in this case it's this SharePoint list, we wanted to ensure that the users that have access to this list are city employees, and we noted 5 user accounts that belong to terminated employees, and these users have been since deactivated, and the city clerk's office has been added to the HR employee separation list. The next category of findings have to do with efficiency. So looking at the PRR process itself, our findings, our recommendations are focused mainly on automating areas that can be automated to streamline the operation and refocus staff time on more value-added items. So we did meet with IT, and there's 2 possible areas that can be automated. One is, as the public goes into the website and enters the request, staff have to then come back and manually input that into the tracker. So that process can be automated, possibly. And another area had to do with attachments. And again, this is very detailed kinds of operational issues, but as staff have to attach, sometimes they have to send many documents, as you can imagine, to satisfy a request. And so that attachment has to take place within that internal tool, and then they have to attach it to the email. So there's duplication of effort. So there's a recommendation to reduce that. And then the other finding related to this has to do with performance metrics. Currently, the city clerk's office has one. It's number of public record requests processed, and we just need a documented methodology for this. And lastly, the audit results are concerning open data. As you can imagine, public records lend themselves very well to open data. There's an open data movement nationwide. As we surveyed 14 cities, we wanted to identify best practices in administering PRRs, and we did note that 8 cities were using a PRR tracking software that allows for online request submittal. If you are the person submitting a request, you can track your request. It also acts as a central repository, both for the requester and for the city using it. So there are advantages to using this type of tool. And we recommend the city review available software, because the tracker is just an internal tool at this point, even though it's a great one. We also did note a trend from these 14 cities where they were posting previously released records publicly, which our city doesn't do right now. And the cities were doing that with varying degrees of transparency. So some were releasing select records, some were just posting the request itself without disclosing the records. So we would like the city to determine whether this may be feasible for Glendale. And 11 of the cities, as I said, have open data initiatives that aid self-search of records. So while some have robust open data programs, some are just starting out, and Glendale is not leading open data. So there is a recommendation to consider joining this and releasing some records, if possible, to aid self-search of records. And finally, there is a data in the tracker, and with the addition of new fields that we have recommended, there can be analytics done. Simple things can be piloted, like record request trend analysis, so that we can identify the most requested records. And finally, updating the web page is the last recommendation that we have. That's to provide clear instructions on completing the forms on the website and listing all the methods that the public can use to request a record. This concludes my presentation. I would like to thank City Clerk staff Ara Majemian and Dr. Abajian for their assistance during the project. They were super responsive to all our requests, and we are all here to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Antonessian. Welcome, Mr. Parajon. Just let the record reflect that Mr. Parajon was here at 2:28, please. Any questions from my fellow committee members? Mr. Bain.
Yeah, is the tracking software something that the city developed, or is it a purchased product?
Right. It was city developed, I believe, by the former city clerk, and Ara Majemian is here, and they can speak more to that because I did not delve into the development of the tool itself.
Commissioner Amir and Commissioners, yes, it was developed in-house, which at that point was much cheaper to get it developed here than it was to go outside and get a vendor for it.
Any other questions, Mr. Bain?
Yeah, I was just curious because you had some suggestions on tracking other categories, and I was wondering if that was something that would be relatively easy to do in-house, or if you've got to go pay a developer outside to.
Right. No, the recommendations that we have would be very easily implemented. They just would involve adding additional columns to the data set, so we could just track more data.
If I may just,
Callahan?
Can I make a statement? I'm sorry, I have to go to another meeting, but I just wanted
Dr. Abajian?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make a statement before I left. I want to note that there were 0 priority 1 findings for the audit report for 2021-2022, and that's a significant accomplishment given the increasing demands on the clerk's office and the decreasing funding and shortage of staff that our office has faced over the past several years. So this accomplishment is because of the impeccable work of my assistant clerk, Ara Majemian, and also my admin assistant, Seta Elias, who spends most of her time on public records requests. So I wanted to acknowledge them and their hard work in making this possible and in having 0 priority 1 findings. And we will address the priority 2 findings by March, and the priority 3 findings as our staffing time and resources allow. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Bain, did you have any other questions?
No, that was it.
Okay. Any other committee members?
I have a brief question here.
Mr. Parajon?
Thank you. The website, you said it needs an upgrade to it. Now, is the game plan eventually going to be where folks can just access the personal data within 24 hours in their system and they'll get their data? Just like right now, I mean, there's already softwares out there that I can plug in and get anything I want, personal. So just wondering how that can connect with the upgraded software.
Right. So the website update would be a simple update to just the instructions on the web page for submitting the PRR. But I think what you're referring to is a software that's the other recommendation that would involve just purchasing a software that would allow people to track their requests. Mm-hmm. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a recommendation that we have already. But it would involve a purchase versus using the free tool that we have right now.
Okay.
Any other questions?
That's it.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Farpetian.
Thank you, Chair Marion. Just one quick point of maybe clarification. I think early on, one of the responses one of the potential responses that was presented was that there were no records found. I think it really means to say no records exist. There's a difference between found and exist. One connotes that actual records exist, but we couldn't find it. But I think the more appropriate response is that there are no records that currently exist. And so just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Varpetian. Mr. Mavian, do you have any questions? Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One, would you remind us again how the decision is made to assign audit funding, audit findings priority 1 versus priority 2 versus priority 3?
Just take that, or do you want me to take that?
Let me answer this question. So at the
Ms. Yang.
end of each of our audit report, we have a Appendix 1 that provides the definitions of priority rankings and along with the value-added categories. So it's basically, a combination of the facts and auditor's judgment, simply put.
Excellent, thank you. And then, I imagine there's a varying sophistication of the applicants who are making these requests. So I imagine there are probably serial public records requests, people or organizations that serially request these PRRs. They have experience in crafting, their public record requests. And then there are probably individuals within the city who, might be seeking some sort of information. And especially when Ms. Varpetian mentioned, the no records exist. Is there a duty by any individual within the city to assist in crafting requests in order to aid in maximum transparency? Ms. Varpetian.
There is. In fact, that's a requirement under the state law.
Excellent. And is that something that was looked at in terms of this audit?
I think you're speaking to performing due diligence to ensure that we're answering these requests with the broadest disclosure in mind. So there are various things that are done inside in the operation that I'd like to note. So first of all, we contact the requester to clarify the request. There is also a secondary layer of review for when there is a case where no record exists, that we are recommending that be done, in addition to city attorney review for each of the requests. The other, recommendation that we have with the name and title of the decision maker that be added, or even an internal policy be developed that where we know who is the decision maker in each of these instances, and we consistently apply that in our written communication would aid due diligence. And also, as I said, the sample that we performed with 99% was within 8 days. We got a sense that most of these requests are just very, the city clerk staff have operational knowledge, and they're mostly requests that we know what they're about, right? And then we also noted that...
Is that routine? Sorry to interrupt you, Ms. Antonesian. Are you suggesting that they're routine requests, or that just from the experience of the city clerk and the city clerk's office, they know, how to respond to these types of requests because they get them frequently?
That's right, exactly. I think when speaking with the city, Lucy Varpetian, and also Aram's team, and also with the departments that receive the most requests, that's the sense we got that, for instance, community development gets a lot of permits, so they know where to route these kinds of requests to get them, right? And also in instances, I wanted to also note that any kind of non-disclosure cases, the ones that I reviewed within calendar year 2021 were very rare. And they always were per the CPRA. The risk of, the benefit to disclosing it obviously outweighed the risk of non-disclosing it. The risk of non-disclosure outweighed disclosure in those instances that I reviewed. And they're not classified per se, so it's not very easy to go inside the tool and know, let me see within this year how many non-disclosures I had. So we have a recommendation to classify them so we can know if we're consistently applying the correct criteria to these kinds of cases.
Excellent.
Chair Marion, may
Yes.
I add to that?
Ms. Varpetian, yes, of course.
I think what you're asking about is whether there is follow-up with regard to getting to the heart of the request. The state law says that the person does not need to state the purpose behind the request, but it also provides an affirmative requirement on the city to speak with the requester to try to get a more focused request. So your question is that effort done? And the answer to that is yes. And certainly if a requester is not satisfied with the completeness of the response, they have the ability to come back and ask for additional records, and then we continue to work with the requester to provide it. But if they put out a very broad request, do not state the purpose behind it, state law also says that they don't have to identify themselves. They could submit an anonymous request. So there are affirmative steps that are taken both at the city clerk's level. If the city clerk is not able to ascertain the type of records they're going for, they will then pose the question. It'll come to the city attorney's office. It'll go to the city manager's office. It'll round its way to the potential departments, multiple departments who could have responsive records. One or more of them will take the lead in trying to identify the specific records and then producing those records. So there is a multi-step effort. It's not just we don't get what you're asking for, so your request is denied. And then I think in the instances of non-disclosure, we are required to cite to the actual legal reason for non-disclosure, and in each instance that is done to say, these are personnel records, they're exempt under the code pursuant to 6254C or whatever it is. So there's the code section cited. Usually the case law is cited to demonstrate why a document is not being produced.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Varpetian. The finding that the average was 8 days, did that include any of the requests that had extensions? Was that average calculated based upon the number of requests that you indicated in the report that were extended?
Yes, it may have included extended cases as well. We didn't exclude those.
Okay. And then finally, my last question, did any of the users who had access that wasn't terminated, was it determined whether any of those users accessed any information after their termination or loss of privilege?
Yes, we confirmed with IT that they permanently deleted those users, so they are not able to access.
Okay, Ms. Antonio, I appreciate that. What I think I need to clarify, was there any determination made whether during the time that those 5 users had access that they should not have had, if there was any access to the system or to the data prior to permanently being deleted?
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. So what we know is that the accounts did not appear in the Active Directory, which is what this SharePoint list is tied to as of September 2022. That's what we were able to ascertain. But I'm not sure if upon termination within that period that, it wasn't detected that they have access, if they have accessed it. But we can get back to you on that.
Mr. Tatana.
I think it's fair to say, to answer your question, we don't know as we sit here, but it's also fair to say that given the circumstances, they could have. It's likely they didn't. They're really that system wouldn't be tied to anything else anyway outside of the public record system. And it is accessible from if you're working remotely, you don't have to be on the city's network. So they could have accessed it, but they wouldn't have really gained much from it.
Yeah, I imagine it would, the tracker wouldn't, so basically, they wouldn't have access to non-redacted information or anything that might, put the city or individuals at risk.
Correct.
Excellent. Ms. Varpetian.
And just to add, the overwhelming majority of the information that is in the system is already a public record. Typically, information that needs to be redacted is routed through email. The department works with the city attorney's office to make sure that the information, to determine whether or not the information is disclosable. A decision is made, information's redacted, and then ultimately uploaded. That doesn't happen 100% of the time. Sometimes it goes through and gets uploaded, and then the city attorney's office makes the determination. But the likelihood that there was privileged information on the system at that point would be rare.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Varpetian. Are there any further questions? Thank you.
Can I just make?
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, can I just
Mr.
make one
Taltarian.
clarification? After I said what I said, I started thinking about what I said. That system would not have been available to anybody who was terminated because it is part of the city's network, not part of the web. So even if they had access, they would have physically had to come into the building, gained access to the network, and then logged in.
Excellent. I appreciate that clarification. And just as an aside, I've had a couple of opportunities to experience the city's public record request system, and also some opportunities for other municipalities and Los Angeles County. And I will say that my experience with the city of Glendale far surpassed in meeting my expectations in terms of the information that I received, the treatment that I received from Los Angeles and Los Angeles County. So I do recognize that there are some areas of opportunity to improve that process, and I know from my experience that it is a priority for city management and the city council to have transparency in terms of the information available, and I think it's absolutely necessary that be the case. But based upon my own personal experience as well, just anecdotal, I had a much better experience with the city of Glendale than I did with Los Angeles County and LA. Specifically as it had to do with the no records exist and the taking the specific word I used and focusing in on that word, that happened actually with the city of Los Angeles. So thank you very much, Ms. Antonesian. If there are no further comments, let's move on to the next. And thank you, Mr. Ajemian. And also thank you to Dr. Abajian. I know she had to leave for sticking around and giving us her perspective. Next, audit.
So the second
John.
presentation we prepared for you this afternoon is related to PCI compliance audit. And I know the existing members have heard this multiple times, and we have 2 new members today, so then it's a perfect time to do a full presentation. So with that, Samuel, you may start.
Good
Mr.
afternoon, Chair Mirian, fellow Audit Committee members. My name is Samuel Salim, and I'll be going over the PCI compliance audit that we just finished. So acronyms, PCI stands for Payment Card Industry, and DSS is Data Security Standards. So together, they're oftenly referred to as PCI DSS. Who sets the standards? Essentially, all the credit card companies, the major ones, got together and formed this PCI Security Standards Council, and they developed the security standards so that there's a uniform basis on which to assess and protect cardholder data. Why do we care about PCI compliance? First of all, it's required. There could be heavy fines and penalties for noncompliance, including up to termination of the ability to accept payment cards. And lastly, prevention is much cheaper than mitigation. When there are breaches, oftentimes the fines and mitigation costs could creep up into the millions of dollars. So there are four compliance levels, depending on the volume of credit card transactions that are processed. And the city is a level 2 merchant, meaning they process between 1 and 6 million transactions a year. And the standards are basically 6 goals broken out into 12 broad requirements. Just going off the left-hand column of the goals, build and maintain a secure network, protect cardholder data, maintain a vulnerability management program, implement strong access controls, regularly monitor and test your networks, and maintain an information security policy. And then within each of these are 12 kind of commonsensical requirements. For example, regarding the first one of building and maintaining a secure network, you should have firewalls. You should change when you have software that processes credit cards. You should change the default usernames. You should have certain password policies in effect, things of that nature. So they're all kind of commonsensical. Obviously, when you implement them, they can get somewhat technical, but these are the requirements and goals at a broad level. So if you look at a credit card, this is the information that's prohibited to keep by any vendor. The chip information, and then the security codes, depending on what kind of card in the front and the back of the card, and then the magnetic strip information. These are not allowed to be kept. The ones that are not allowed to be kept unless you have proper encryption is the full PAN, which is the primary account number, the 16-digit number. And then what you're allowed to keep is your cardholder name and expiration date it's usually kept for identification purposes to link a transactions to. So why do we do these audits? It demonstrates ongoing compliance. At the end of the year, when a security assessor comes and gives us our formal assessment to issue the report on compliance, that's at a certain point in time. But compliance is actually a year-round thing. We're supposed to be in compliance at all times. So this helps us in that respect. And if there's any deficiencies that we identify along the way, we identify them timely versus at year end, and we rectify it right away. And then it helps us prepare for the annual audit that takes place at the end of the year. And lastly, raise awareness citywide of the importance of PCI compliance. So the objective of this audit is to determine our ongoing compliance with our PCI policies and procedures. And the scope is based on the in-scope requirements as defined by that year-end qualified security assessor. We were fortunate enough to shadow them at the end of the year to see kind of what are the different site systems and tasks that they perform. And so we try to mimic that as best we can throughout our audits that we do here. So frequency, we do this 3 times a year, and this is our 3rd and final audit. And the goal is at the end of the 3rd audit that we cover all the site systems and tasks that that the external auditor will look at, and we've done that for this year. Audit process, we conduct site visits, we perform system assessments, and we verify calendar of events, and I'll get into what each of those means. So for sites, it's basically your in-person locations where you take credit card information and you process it there in person. Systems are essentially what it's any type of online payment, anything where you use a computer to process a payment. And then regarding the calendar events, so what we've done is we've put together a calendar and various tasks throughout the year, and we try to do these timely just to make sure that we're doing all the tasks that we're supposed to be doing within any given year. And so this last audit was for June, July, and August. The summary results, so we looked at 7 sites, 2 systems, and 7 calendar event tasks. And there was only one exception that we noted with one of the system assessments that we did. PCI is obviously a little bit sensitive in that the actual details of, especially like system type findings, we can't disclose what exactly those are because we don't want to put our vulnerabilities out there to the public. But the one finding we had with the systems was regarding a security setting. There was a security setting with one of the systems that slightly deviated from the PCI standards. And so when we brought it up to the department, they went ahead and corrected it. And they are now compliant with what the PCI standards are for those particular security settings. With that, I'll take any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Salim. Questions from my fellow committee members? Mr. Mavi.
I noticed that the data is from 2007 to become a level 2 merchant, between 1 and 6 million transactions. What is the pro, I guess, moving up the tiers?
So as you move up, the requirements get more stringent. So for a level 1 merchant that processes $6 million or more, 6 million transactions or more, you're required to have an external party come and issue a report on compliance. So we being level 2, that's optional, but we've chosen to go above what's required and get that report on compliance. Even though we're a level 2, we're still acting. We're doing the requirements of a level 1 merchant.
And just follow up, I noticed that in the calendar year 2021, there was a drop from that threshold. Have we identified what that drop was that took us below the 1 million to 6 million threshold?
Oh, okay. So then the audit report, yes. So there, during COVID time, the transaction levels dropped dramatically because of most of the locations were closed at that time. So the levels dropped, but our merchant banks stated these are likely temporary in nature. So they said to keep our levels as they were before, thinking that we're going to return to normal once everything opens up.
And do we have prorated numbers on this calendar year? Are we trending in that direction?
So I do have those. I do have the numbers for last year, and they were still below the level 2 technical thresholds.
Yeah.
But we did confirm with the banks that we are to remain a level 2, even though we're still technically below that at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mavian. Mr. Bain.
Are there any processing that's done via paper where people mail in bills with credit card numbers written on them?
Right. So so these are more your in-person payments. From all the locations that we looked at, they don't take mail-in credit card data. There are some locations that have to temporarily write down credit card numbers to process it, process the card information, but they shred that paperwork immediately after processing the transaction.
Excellent. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Salim.
Thank you.
Let's move on, please. Ms. Xiang.
So that concludes our presentation for completed audit projects. Now I will just go over the remaining sections of the activity report. Section 2 provides a brief summary of the projects that the team was working on as of September 30th. So there were 3 projects we're currently working on. The first one is a tree trimming contract audit. It's a contract compliance audit, and Samil has been working on it, and he's right now working on drafting the report, and hopefully we'll get this issued soon. The next audit is fleet vendor management audit. So this is the operational audit that Natalie is currently working on. So we're also hoping to get this one done by the end of the year. And the third one is data center physical security audit. So from the topic, you probably can guess that we most likely will not have a presentation on this audit. We plan just issue an express memo documenting objective scope methodology, but the detailed review results will be provided to IT without public disclosure. So that's the project in progress. And moving on to section 3 is continuous auditing.
Can I ask a question about that? So I understand that given the particular sensitivity of that specific audit, that would be directly supplied to IT, but is there any way that there's an opportunity for audit to give some sort of feedback on, be able to ask some questions about the findings of that report in a manner in which would not expose sensitive data to the public?
So I guess we'll have to wait till we finish the review, and then we'll evaluate, see if any of the findings, if we have any findings that will be less sensitive or it will not have potential harm to the city.
Okay, and then my recollection is that the audit committee can't do closed sessions, but would you verify whether that's possible or not, Ms. Varpetian?
Yes, so closed session items are specifically outlined in the Brown Act. And unless it's one of those itemized reasons to go into closed session, then we cannot go into closed session. And that's state law. It's not driven by the city. And so, if unless we could meet one of the criteria, then we cannot. And in this body's purview doesn't fall within one of those exemptions.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, thanks for answering that.
All right. So the next section, section 3, is continuous auditing. So during this past quarter, we've actually completed quite a few continuous auditing projects, total 5 of them. I'll just go over each one. So the first one is procurement card test. So this is to identify potential non-compliance with the city's P-card policy. So we identified 2 split payments, and the 2 active P-cards were identified that had terminated approvers. So the detailed information was provided to both purchasing and also the department who were, had the violations. And then the recommendation is to have the department head of of those departments to remind employees of following the city's P-card policy, or in terms of the split payments, if they do need to increase their authorized limit, and then they should consider that as well. That's another option.
Ms. Yang, would you briefly, for our new committee members, explain the split the split payments?
Split payment. So let me give you an example. So say I have a P card, and then I have authorized the limit of 1,000 per transaction. So that's how much I'm, authorized to spend. So then I have this thing, a software I want to buy, and it costs, say, 1,800, right? So obviously I can't. So then I'm going to be smart about it. I will split them into two 900 transactions, and then now my P card can be used to purchase this software. So that's kind of the split, how split works.
Yeah, and my understanding from past instances is that in almost every case, this was just an employee that was taking the initiative and trying to, get something done that needed to be done that was necessary and known of, rather than some sort of, something nefarious.
So far, that's the case.
Excellent, thank you. In terms of the two active P cards that were identified and had terminated approvers, I imagine you know the question that's coming next. Were there any expenditures on those P cards?
So actually, purchasing has a kind of a practice. They don't terminate or disable the approver's account until they have the cardholder has transactions for them to approve. So then, based on that, the answer is no. But nonetheless, we recommend that they should still, disable the approver's account in a more timely manner.
Got it. Okay, let me, I heard that, and I just want to kind of work this out. So in this case, during this P card test, Audit identified that these two P cards were active and the users were terminated? Or did they try to use the P card?
No.
Okay.
No, there were no suspicious transactions. The approvers were terminated. So there were no transactions being done, but if there were, the approver was terminated, at which point purchasing would just replace that with an active approver, because transactions don't go without approval. So there's very low risk, but it's just we would like purchasing to take an active approach and proactively remove terminated employees as approvers.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Ms. Antonessian. Thank you for clarifying that.
So moving on to the next test is GASB 87 leases. So this is something new, and the city is in the process of implementing it. So then Natalie has developed a new script. I just want to mention that I'm so proud of my team that we've been, we spent like 3-4 years to get trained on writing the scripts, and then now we're able to independently develop scripts, and I'm very happy about that. So this one is about to identify leases that are subject to GASB 87 reporting. So the script identified 2 additional lease agreements. However, it was concluded that they were not subject to GASB 87 reporting. But nonetheless, those leases should be added to a list that is maintained by finance. The next one, you've heard this before, duplicate payment. So who did this one? You did, okay. Oh yeah, let me see. Thank you. All right. So for duplicate payment, we didn't identify any duplicate payment this time. The test covered January to March 2022. So this is a very common test that internal audit performs. It's provide assurance that the controls that management established are actually working properly. So the next two are related to user access control, Active Directory. The first one is to making sure that Active Directory user accounts are for active employees. And then the next one is to make sure that every active employee has an enabled AD account, Active Directory account. So the detailed test result, I'm not going to cover too much detail about this one, but then the detailed results was provided to IT for follow-up. So that is section 3. Moving on, any questions? Okay, so moving on to next. So the next 3 sections of 4, 5, 6 are related to quarterly follow-up of outstanding audit items. Welcome. Let's see. Number 4. So section 4 actually just provides you a summary of the overall status of the follow-up of the recommendations from past audits. And for the past quarter, a total of 10 items were added from the 2 audits you just heard. And so we follow up on total 48 outstanding items, of which 7 were implemented, and 41 items remained outstanding at the end of the quarter. So the next section 5, it provides a summary of the priority 1 audit items. These have not been, it's the same 2 priority ones from last quarter. Let's see. So both have some progress made. So for the first one, as I mentioned before, every time we has external party involved, it takes longer and it's kind of out of our control. But in this case, GWP actually made progress, and we shared a draft MOU with the school district, and it is being reviewed, and hopefully we can have some results from this item. And then the next one, the emergency medical service revenue recovery audit. Progress were made last quarter, and they had set up a outline of the policy procedure manual, and then due to staff turnover, they got delayed. But now they hired a new person, a full-time person. Hopefully, can speed this up a little bit. So we'll see. The next section 6, this is the, based on the resolution number 2 of this committee, the department directors are requested to appear to discuss the status of the items if they fall into 3 categories. One is if they're not implemented, if they have not implemented for 2 years or 3 years. So in this case, we do have 2, and then the department heads, and then the key contact person. Unfortunately, they weren't able to make it, but then you can tell from these status update, for the first one, again, involves external entity, but Public Works Department is actually actively working with Crescenta Valley Water District to, presented them with a draft agreement that we recommended So they have a new anticipated completion date as December 2022. The next item, it's listed here, but it's really not necessarily due because even at the when we issue the report, the management response is, let me see, so GWP will evaluate the feasibility of a more data-driven seasonal sewer methodology once the smart meter system upgrade is complete. So it's really depending on the smart meter upgrade project. So they have a new anticipated completion date that is June 2024. So that's the follow-up. Any questions?
No, no questions. Let's move on.
Thank you. And then the last is the advisory services. So internal audit team members are often asked to participate in a variety team project. So we have 3 currently. One is the Investment Policy Advisory Committee, then PCI Compliance Team, and the other one is Energy Risk Management Committee. It's a routine activity, but for this past quarter, I think I just want to, it's like a training season. So for both PCI and Energy Risk Management Committee, we had mandatory trainings that, for example, for PCI team, on an annual basis around in October, every employee who process or has any responsibilities related to credit cards are required to take this mandatory training. So for internal audits, everyone have completed the training. The Energy Risk Management Committee, they also have a mandatory training, annual training. It's an anti-market manipulation training. So I think Samuel, did you do that one? Sorry? Not yet. Okay. So this one was required by all the traders and the committee members. So, I do want to mention for PCI compliance team, the team did perform a annual incident response exercise, incident response plan exercise. So City Chair's office, came up with a scenario, and then we selected a department, and then asked the department staff to, fill out whatever form following the incident response plan, and then answer questions, and then the team will observe. So audit participated and observed that exercise. And then the team, had some discussions at the end and see if there's anything we can improve. So that's basically, the report. That concludes my report for this quarter.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Zhang. Let's move on to the next item, please.
Item number 7, Audit Committee or staff comments.
I'll open it up to staff first. Any comments? Ms. Zhang?
Well, I just want to, on behalf of entire internal audit team, to welcome the 2 new audit committee members, and thank you for volunteering your time. And I think your experience and your expertise in so many areas, like pension and project or performance management, or even data analytics. So those are all very valuable to the committee, to internal audit, and to the city. So we're very happy to have you on board, and look forward to working with you in years to come.
Thank you, Ms. Zhang.
Thank you.
And I think that'll that'll give an opportunity where I will encourage our new committee members to briefly introduce themselves if they'd like and tell us a little bit about their experience. Mr. Mavian?
Sure. I really appreciate that, the warm welcome. You've been great, and so has your team. In my short experience with the committee, I was born and raised in Glendale. I actually went to Mark Keppel, Toll Middle School, and Hoover High School all on one street. I own a financial planning company on Brand Boulevard, and I'm delighted to be here, just to be of service. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome. Mr. Bain?
I'm Mike Bain, and I've only been in Glendale about 30 years, so not quite as long. But we have a pension administration firm here. I'm an actuary and involved in actuarial, varying actuarial organizations on a national level. Just got back from a conference today to make this, and have participated in the Blue Ribbon Pension Committee prior to this. I would have to say I am pretty much a pension expert, and along with that goes a certain amount of financial matters that we deal with.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Bain. Welcome. Any comments, Mr. Parhon?
No, just want to welcome you two to this great committee, and hopefully we'll keep you around long.
Likewise, yes. Thank you to our new committee members. I encourage you to ask questions and really leverage the knowledge and experience of staff and management. And I look forward to working with each of you in the coming year, and excited to have your individual perspectives added to our committee. And thank you to staff and management for the preparation that went into preparing for today's meeting, as well as thank you to the City Council for finally appointing a couple of new members. It's been a while. We have a full committee, and I'm excited to move forward in the new year. Next item, please.
Item number 8, new business.
Hearing no new business, let's move on to the last item, please.
Item number 9, adjournment.
Second that.
Well, we'll need a motion first.
A motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Excellent. We are adjourned.